Woohoo.
All right, well, welcome everyone to the last session of the day. This is the COVID and new legislation's impact on state procurement and the increasing importance of the Unified Procurement Program session. My name is Kelly Krieger-Hurrah, and we're excited to have you join our featured speakers today, State Purchasing Managers Alex Wilson and Dave Luttrell for this session. This will be interactive and it's also recorded. So we encourage you to ask questions. When the Q&A opens, you can raise your hand. There's a button at the bottom of the screen and we can call on you and unmute your mic if you'd like to speak. If you don't want to speak, just put the question in the chat and Chris and I will be monitoring that and we'll make sure these presenters get your questions. So now I'm going to ask Mr. Joe Kim to introduce our presenters.
Great, thanks, Kelly. So I want to read just some very quick bios on Dave and Alex, just so that you know exactly who they are, because I think one of the best things coming out of a session like this is having some new resources. So when you leave the conference, you know who to contact afterwards. So let me just very quickly tell you a little bit about Dave. Dave is our procurement training manager, as well as an acting state purchasing officer. He trains and engages state agency personnel and other CPO staff on the e-procurement system BidBuy. And you probably know a little bit about that, and we'll talk more about that today. And then other procurement related topics. Let me just say that, you know, Dave has literally trained thousands of state procurement staff as well as vendors. So if you ever have a problem with somebody hearing something wrong from our office, you might want to point your finger at Dave. But Dave is a certified professional public buyer, and he's been with our office for over 5 years. Let me just tell you about some of his previous positions, which is why he's so perfect in this role. His previous positions have included user support specialists, specifically helping vendors with all of the state's disclosures. We know how complicated that is. He's been a procurement specialist working with a variety of different agencies. And then he was our small business specialist before becoming an acting SPO and then heading up our training department. Let me just also brag on Dave a little bit. So when I first met Dave, you know, he came to us and he's had a long, and he continues to have an active career in music. And so he's a performer, very successful. I was going to pull up on the screen, but I think I won't embarrass him. But back in, I think it was 2017, Dave, you guys won the 30th annual American Songwriter Magazine contest for original song.
This is true. This is
amazing. True. Pretty awesome. Okay,
and I didn't pay Joe to say that, by the way. I didn't pay him. He likes to embarrass me on these things whenever he can.
He's not easily embarrassed. Alex Wilson is our policy advisor and also a state purchasing officer. In these roles, she regulates agency procurements, updates joint purchasing procurement processes. We're going to talk about that today. Engages in contract negotiations and promotes diverse vendor relationships. Alex utilizes conflict resolution and strategic sourcing to communicate complex ideas. So one of the things that you're going to hear today is she has an incredible ability to simplify things. Alex's experience with contract compliance, legislation analysis, and solicitation oversight give her the ability to assess, regulate, and execute successful procurements. She recognizes the significance of developing and exceeding both procurement and diversity goals and maintaining timely and transparent procurements. She's a graduate of Tuskegee University, where she earned a BS in political science and then went on to Mizzou, to the University of Missouri, and got her Juris Doctorate. And I should mention that Dave also is a Fighting Illini, graduated from the University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana, and was also in the Marching Illini. So having said all of that, let me just take a step back. Some of you are new. The Chief Procurement Office, we essentially regulate procurements for state agencies. So we oversee procurements for 60 state agencies, and we make sure not only that they get what they need, but we make sure it's lawful, but we try to do it in the most efficient manner possible. So with that in mind, you know, one of the things that we do is we provide tools for the agencies, and by that it also translates to vendors. So BidBuy, the e-procurement system, is you should be really familiar with that system by now, but Dave is going to do a quick overview. as well as the Illinois Procurement Gateway. And so you should also be familiar with that. That's another tool that we offer to vendors. We also have, just very quickly, a summary. We also have an economic development program. You know, our small business set aside program that is specifically targeted at trying to assist Illinois small businesses get state contracts. So, you know, you guys are so integral in that specific program. You know, frankly, when I started, we went from about 30 million and we got up to about $200 million within about 5 or 6 years. And it was in no short order because of the work that you guys were doing. Your outreach and assistance to those vendors getting into the program was so critical. We also have a joint and cooperative purchasing program. That's a newer program. It's going to continue to grow. It assists local governments, but we're going to specifically talk today about this, about state agencies. And I guess that's kind of really all I wanted to cover in terms of what our office does. But, you know, most importantly, again, I'm going to turn it over to Dave. You really need to understand, you know, that we regulate procurement. So we are a regulator. And if you have any questions, as a vendor has a question, sometimes you'll hear that, oh my gosh, I was found non-responsive, or they want to file a protest, that type of a thing. You know, you can certainly reach out to our office for guidance in those matters. Okay, having said all of that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave, and I know we've got a good program and we want to get going on it. So Dave.
All right, thanks, Joe. Appreciate it. So while I start to share my screen, yeah, there we go. It should be coming your way. So the first thing I want to talk about, just to briefly touch on what Joe was discussing, you guys are in such a unique opportunity in terms of the vendor outreach that, I mean, of course, we are so thankful that you guys do what you do, and also thank you for your time today for sitting in on this presentation. So we're excited to be here again. But talking about the IPG, because we were kind of joking before the session started that it's a bit of Joe Kim is our tour guide to Illinois procurement. It can be quite a maze, is what we say. And so the job that you guys do, and specifically what the Illinois Procurement Gateway does for vendors, is it really simplifies the whole contracting process for vendors, and honestly, selfishly, for the state as well. So you guys know what the Illinois Procurement Gateway is. I just want to take just a quick second to say that anytime that you guys have a chance to point vendors to the IPG, you're probably already doing it, but we just want to let you know that that is probably one of the easiest things that a vendor can do to make it very much easier to contract with the state of Illinois. Again, the IPG is there to, in essence, pre-qualify a vendor, just because they get all of their paperwork kind of out of the way. So when they submit to a procurement or a solicitation opportunity with the state of Illinois, they can fill out one page that has their IPG number on it. You guys know this is called Forms B. But any chance we get to talk to people who then talk to vendors, we want to shout it from the rooftops. The numbers have been great for IPG. The feedback we get from vendors regarding IPG is nothing but positive. And so just, we want to keep that train rolling. So thank you for your position and helping us out there. So one thing I'm going to talk about specifically is also, Joe mentioned it, our e-procurement system, BidBuy. So I'm also going to touch base on, go through a few slides talking about some of the common reasons that vendors are deemed non-responsive. And a lot of those are, it's not because we don't like what the vendor is submitting or something. It comes down to the procurement code is written, and we are there to regulate and make sure that these awards are given fairly and per the Illinois procurement code. So we are just in line with the procurement code. And in many instances, the code specifically calls out, and we'll walk through them here in a minute, that they have to be registered for Board of Elections by time of bid. And if they're not, there's really just no way to fix that. So we're going to touch on 4 really common things that we see. Of course, there will be other situations that vendors would be deemed non-responsive for, but we're just going to hit the big ones that we see most often. But first off, I'm going to go out into BidBuy, and we're also going to discuss how a vendor submits in BidBuy, how easy it is, and how quickly they can submit in BidBuy as we all have learned with the pandemic, everything is moving electronic. We've all learned Zoom and WebEx, and we've been kind of pulled kicking and screaming into the electronic world. And of course, BidBuy was and the Chief Procurement Office for General Services was in a great position to transition and have to kind of weather the storm, so to speak, within the pandemic, because we had this system up and running already. So the transition from the paper world to submitting bids and awards and contracts electronically was a much smoother transition for our organization. And so we're just going to be full steam ahead with the system. So I'm going to touch on a few things regarding BidBuy, and again, walk quickly through how to submit in BidBuy so that you guys can be armed with, and you can see it firsthand quickly how easy it is. And then so we can kind of, when you guys get questions or vendors are hesitant, you can see, hey, you know what? I've already seen that system. We can walk you through that. And again, like Joe said, if we ever have questions from vendors, of course, that's what we're here to do, is to help walk them through the process. So first off, here's the home screen in BidBuy. If you haven't been in BidBuy in the last few months, this is going to look a little different to you. The system itself has not changed. It does not look any different. But the home screen does look a little different. So there's a couple things that I want to point out without even being logged in, without even being registered. Again, one of the pillars of Illinois procurement is that it's transparent, right? State agencies are acquiring goods and services with our tax dollars, so it is transparent. So you don't have to be registered in BidBuy to go in and see what is being procured. So at the very top here, you have a search box, which is connected to this drop down. So if I can search for bid solicitations, essentially is anything that is open at that point, or purchase orders, blankets, which are those contracts, or vendors. So maybe I'm a vendor, or that you get a question, hey, I've heard about this thing BidBuy. I don't know if I'm registered or not. You can easily check to see if that vendor is registered by searching for the name underneath the vendor dropdown. Now, if you open up the advanced search, now this opens up just a lot more parameters. So again, I'm searching for a bid or a purchase order. But let's say in this case, I don't know exactly the name of it. I don't have a bid number. Maybe I deleted the email that I was notified for, something like that. This opens up a lot more parameters for you to open. So if you just know any of the information, you would be able to track that down. So by the department, or if I know what agency it was from, I can search by keyword. A lot of different options. Here's another one that is very interesting. I'm a subcontract. I'm a BEP vendor, or I'm a veteran vendor, and I just am looking for all of those procurements that have a BEP goal on them. I can click yes on this, search it up, and I'm going to get everything that's out there for the state at that point. Or I'm a small business, and I'm looking for those procurements that are only set aside for small businesses. I can use that here. So a lot of information on the advanced search there. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to the home screen. Again, if I scroll down, there are going to be some additional the supplier activities here. If I can click on that, it also just takes me further down the website to here where supplier activities live. If I want to look for all open bids, so let's just take a look at that. I click open bids. These are all the open bids right now that are open, that have been published, that are out on the street. So you can easily export these. If over on the right-hand corner, you can see I can export to Excel right there and kind of sort if I wanted to. Again, vendors are being notified for those procurements for the NIGP codes that they have selected to be notified for. Okay, so a vendor is not going to receive everything that the state of Illinois is looking to procure. It just doesn't work that way. They go in and select the type of categories of solicitations they want to receive, and they can always change that too. So that's another thing. Maybe if we always say cast a wide net to our vendors, because you want to be notified for anything that you could potentially supply. But then again, if they're getting too many emails and they want to go change that, they certainly can do that. So that's all of our open solicitations. And there are additional resources for your vendors as you scroll down the page into important links too. So we have a lot of different vendor resources, how to register and bid by, guides, videos, those sorts of things. Another thing that we talked about was the Illinois Procurement Gateway. Of course, there's a link directly to that from the bid by website. And also another one I wanted to highlight too is the pathway to procurement. And so the pathway to procurement is intended as a vendor resource, again, because it can be complicated to contract with the state of Illinois, right? So we have a website here, and you guys are probably well aware of it, but I just want, if you're not, or if you're new, we want to make sure that this is out there for everybody. And this will walk through a vendor through what do they need to be able to do business with the state of Illinois. And so that's a great website there. So what we're going to do now is walk through how easy it is to actually contract or submit a quote, excuse me, in bid by. So I moved into this training environment. This actually, we use this just for our training, so that way we're not messing with anything that's in the real world, but it does mirror the bid by production environment to a T. So this is what a vendor's home screen is going to look like as their seller role. I'm going to go, let's just say I got notified for a bid opportunity. I go into bids. I select bids. Oh, shoot, I'm sorry, it kicked me out. It was a while before I got logged in. Let's do that again. All right, so I go to bids. And this is going to bring up a list of all those that I was notified for. So these are specific open bids that the NIGP code is being used for ones that I notified. So let's see, I'm going to go to this toll highway one. There we go. Sorry. So there's hyperlinks on the left-hand side. I click on the hyperlink, and now this is going to give me just the general information about the solicitation, the organization, the agency, when is this going to be due, as well as the attachments here. So if I highlight or if I scroll over the attachments, you can see that everything that is viewable by a vendor is there. So a vendor can view the attachment. Hey, is this something that I want to respond to? A couple other things that are important on this page is this a small business set aside procurement, right? So if that is yes, again, that is only going to be, you can only submit if you are a small business vendor. And then also, is there a BEP or veteran goal placed upon this solicitation? If yes, what is that BEP goal? So immediately I can see those sort of opportunities as a BEP subcontractor, or if I'm a prime, knowing I'm going to need to subcontract out to achieve that BEP or veteran goal. So very easily from there. And then if I scroll down to the bottom, of course, it has the line item information that agencies will put. That'll look a little bit differently from procurement to procurement. Some agencies will put specific instructions in here. That's always very important. But we're going to go ahead and scroll to the bottom and say, yes, I know I want to create a quote. So I select create quote. And again, if anybody has any questions or anything, feel free to jump in and let me know too if I need to go back over anything. So at this
Hey,
point,
I did have a
there is one question in the
I could
chat.
interrupt for a minute.
yes, please.
So the question is, do all vendors receive emailed opportunities or only the ones registered in the set aside program?
Okay, so great question. So you will only receive, so every time that a solicitation is put out, whether it's a set aside or not, the only vendors that will actually receive notification will be vendors that were selected to receive the NIGP codes being used. So NIGP code for a solicitation, I don't know why I even know this. So education consulting is 91838. If I'm a vendor that clicked and selected to be notified for everything that, for all solicitations that use 91838, I receive a notification. Now, if you are a set aside vendor and you also have the opportunity for small purchases that are set aside for you. So if I'm a non-small business vendor and they are doing a small purchase for, let's say $50,000, I'm not going to receive that notification as a non-small business because it is set aside for small businesses. but on an IFB or an RFP, those more formal solicitations that are above our small purchase limit, so above $105,000, everybody with that NIGP code is notified. But again, that's also, just to add another note, it's still, just because you don't get notified doesn't mean you can't respond. Okay. So let's say an agency puts out a solicitation. I don't get notified because I didn't select that NIGP code, but I look at it and I find it again on that open bid section. There's nothing saying that I can't respond to that, other than, so there's the one exception there, is if I'm a non-small business trying to submit to a set aside. At that point, I cannot do that if I'm a non-small business vendor.
How do you, so I'm
Does that
sorry,
answer
how
the
do you
question?
do that if it's not in your queue?
I'm sorry, say that again, Chris.
How do you bid something that's, I mean, I've had that situation before, and what we had to do was contact the contracting officer to make sure that they added it to their queue, once they're logged in, added into their bid queue before they could bid it. Otherwise, they were unable to access it. So I'm confused.
Okay, so let me go back. So let's say, let's go to that open bids. Let's do that. If I go to open bids, let's say this pest control one that's currently out there.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Now I'll need to be logged in to be able to do it, right? I can't create quote here, but I can go in and say, okay, this is bid number 24080. I can exit. And then once I go in and actually sign in,
Okay.
then I can
Got
go
it.
in and search for that. So I see where the kind of disconnect could be there. So I think the proper, kind of response there in your situation would be find the bid number and then sign in and search for that bid number. Because then at that point, you would be able to. The only issue that you would run into again is if you're a non-small business, you won't be able to submit for something that was set aside. Now, the reason why, so you might ask, well, hey, Dave, well, then why do you advertise that? And the reason why the state advertises a situation where it is a set aside is because we want more small businesses to be in the program, quite honestly. And we must notify the public on any of those formal solicitations, which are the IFBs or RFPs.
And one more question on the NIGP codes.
Yes.
So I think initially when you registered for IPG, you chose your NIGP codes and they automatically transferred over to bid buy, and that is no longer the case, correct?
No, they do transfer. Yes, they do transfer. Okay, so here's the difference. It's a one-way street from IPG to bid buy. Now, if I change my NIGP codes, let me go into my vendor account. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my home screen again. And
Do you want to show how people to do that too? Because it's kind
Sure.
of complicated.
Yeah,
I mean,
and so what you do is, so just to finish that one thought is, if I change NIGP codes in bid buy, it's not going to go in and change my my NIGP codes in IPG. However, when I renew an IPG and I want to add a few more codes, it will add it to bid buy. So there is a interface from IPG to bid buy, but it doesn't go back the other way.
Okay.
But honestly, at the end of the day, bid buy is where it needs to be. So, and the only way to add NIGP codes in the IPG is to do a new registration, which means you have to resubmit everything, or at least a, renewal registration again.
Okay.
But to move on to how do you add those NIGP codes?
Because
You have to do it in so I'm in the seller. There's two roles in bid buy from a vendor standpoint. There's seller, and then there's also seller administrator. So the seller does the day-to-day activities, submits quotes, does all the actual procurement functionality, but the seller administrator is who goes in and deals with maintains users on that account, changes information. If you move, you maintain organization information. So then if I select maintain organization information, you can see maintain commodity codes and services. So I'm going to go in there and click on that. Maintain commodity codes. And that's where you add your commodity codes.
Would you ever consider putting a default button on there to receive all solicitation notices?
Man, careful what you ask for, Chris. That's a lot of emails.
But it's better than taking probably 2 hours to find all your NIGP codes, and hopefully you didn't miss anything. And also too, it'd be really good for us because we get alerted on all the solicitations.
Well, honestly, if you were going to go that route, I think you could just go to that open bids page. I mean, because that's everything.
Yeah.
If you were going to, rather than, I mean, it'd be thousands of emails. And there's just, the state buys so much stuff.
Okay.
But, I don't know. No one's ever asked that question before, but that's why I like doing these things. So anyway, I don't know why this is spinning, but.
Or you could do it, you could put a default button for all or in one of the subcategories.
This is true, right. Rather than those 00 codes, you could just, rather than selecting.
Correct.
The idea though is we want the vendors to get as specific as possible, just so, because on the other end of that, Chris, we also hear, it's a very common complaint. Well, why am I getting all these emails from the state of Illinois? So we get that other side of it too. So, I mean, I see what you're saying. Absolutely. And so that's why we try to, we tell vendors, we want you to cast a wide net, but again, you're going to receive those emails, the notifications for everything that you select. So we don't want you to, you kind of thread the needle there a little bit.
Okay.
So I apologize. I'm not sure why this is just spinning, but this is where the page you would go to, and then you just start selecting NIGP codes, or deselecting. You can delete them as well. But again, if I do it in bid buy, it's not going to change in my IPG registration. So if they do want to add them, and here's another thing that we say in general for our vendors is every year IPG, you have to be renewed. That's a great time to just review all your NIGP codes and see if you wanted to add or delete at that time. But again, on a day-to-day basis, a vendor could go in and change codes today and change them tomorrow if they want in bid buy, because essentially that's the real, that's the main, I mean, that's the system that's going to be actually doing the notifications. Okay, so let's try that again real quick. I'd love for you to see you guys, or see that real quick. For some reason, it's not liking it. Okay, there isn't much to it. Honestly, it's just a list of codes, and then you're selecting or deselecting at that point. We can always circle back if we need to. If we have any questions regarding that, walking a vendor through anything like that, we can do that for sure. So I'm going to change my seller administrator back to seller, because again, the seller is who's doing the day-to-day stuff. And I'm going to go back to that bid. And we're going to create a quote for that bid. Okay, so we've opened up. I say, yep, I do want to respond to this. At the bottom, they click create quote. And what they're going to do is we're going to complete, it starts us on the general tab here. We're just going to complete a couple of these tabs, not all of them actually. Only a few of them actually even need anything to be entered. And then we get to the summary tab, and then we're going to submit. Okay, so actually on the general tab, you don't have to do anything. We can just select, save, and continue. Now, at this point too, you can see that I have a quote number. And so at this point, I have a quote that is in progress. You can see the status is in progress here. So I can leave and come back. So a really common question that we get a lot is, do I have to do it all at one time and submit and everything? Or can I start to work on a quote and save items and come back and forth? Absolutely. As long as you save, you now have a quote number, you can come back. And so what happens is, let's just show that real quick. If I go back to my home screen and I go into my quotes from my home screen, you can see that I have these 5 different silos. I have an informal quote, I have working quote, which is the one that's in progress. I can see my submitted quotes, I can see my withdrawn quotes. And so that's another thing that provides a lot of value to the agency, or to the vendor, excuse me, is everything that I submit to the state of Illinois all stays in the system. I can always go back and look, see what I did on a previous solicitation. So that's really powerful. So I can go to the working queue, and now I can go right back to that quote. It's sitting in my working queue. And then I have to acknowledge that, yep, this quote has not been submitted. So once acknowledged, I can finish the quote and submit it for consideration. So I click yes, it's gonna take me right back to my quote, and we were right back to where we were. Okay, so the next tab is the items tab. And this is where you're gonna put in pricing for all your line items. This is as straightforward as it can get. For each line item, you just put in your price. Okay, it is really important that you put in a price here, because on the right hand side, if you happen to notice, when that was no bid, it defaulted to no bid. So if somebody doesn't put in the price, we can't award that because they didn't give us a price for the thing. You know, they could submit a quote as a no bid, and we don't want that, right? We need the price there. Okay, so as soon as I click out of that, it fills that. In this case, we only have the one line item, so it's kind of for the entire quote. But of course, you'll see multiple line items on other contracts. Initial term would be one line item, and maybe a renewal term would be another line item. Okay, next up is the questions tab. Some agencies are utilizing this questions, which they'll put in a question that says, yes, you have to be registered or not for a particular thing, or you also may not use the questions too. It's very specific to particular procurements, but I put this one on here just so you can see that it's a potential. But again, up at the top, you can see that I have a quote validation error. Question 1, it's mandatory. So it's also going to aid the vendor. It's going to let you know, like, hey, I can't submit this quote without having this. So they'll have to select an answer to that. They can ignore subcontractors and notes. We don't have to do anything with that. They can use the notes, and we do have a note for this notes tab that it's for the vendor's use. We can't see anything here. Any authorized users who have access to this can see this note. Honestly, I'm unsure if vendors use this or not, because again, the state can't see it. So, but it is there as an option for them to do. And then terms and conditions is next. This will be a hard stop. Again, we have that terms and conditions is not acknowledged here. So again, the system is kind of letting the vendor know you're going to have to do something here on this tab before you can submit. Okay, so they can accept the terms and conditions of the bid. Again, this is not, it is a hard stop within the system, but if a vendor is taking exceptions to terms and conditions, that's really going to be done in the attachments and the paperwork that they are submitting, not necessarily done right here. So we
And
do
Dave,
tell vendors, yes, sir.
I just have a quick question on that, on the terms and conditions. I understand that you're doing that in the contract and everything like that.
Mhm.
Are you having on your construction or some of your minor construction work, having exceptions due to supply chain? Because in most of the contracts, the pricing has to be held for a certain period of time, and then some of the contractors can only hold that pricing till the end of the month or 30 days.
For so long, right? Yeah, and that those types of things would be specific to those procurements, and it would probably be addressed in the solicitation document. I mean, we know in real life, we know that stuff is happening. So I haven't seen that per se, but I'm also not involved with construction procurements, so I can't speak confidently on how they're approaching that. But again, if it's an issue with supply chain for those terms and conditions, it's something that's happening probably industry wide. And if that's the case, hopefully the agency might be building some of those timelines into the procurement to begin with. But so they'll accept the terms and conditions. I'm sorry, Chris, I don't have a better answer for you there. But that's something maybe we can circle back to and we can touch base on, and I can find an
I,
answer for you.
I've had a couple awards, and the contracting offices have been working with the vendors
Okay.
on delays and things like that. So
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, hopefully that won't continue, but we know that that's a thing. Okay. So then they will accept the terms and conditions. And then the last step is the attachments. So the attachments is where, per the solicitation document, every solicitation might be a little bit different, but this is where they would attach their financial disclosures and conflicts of interest, their Forms A, Forms B, the IFB document, the contract, all those sorts of things. And it's going to be very specific to the solicitation. And so we're always pointing vendors back to read that solicitation carefully and attach all the required documents. So, and how they attach their documents is add file. So they add file, they're going to go in and choose file, and then it just takes them into their drive or their computer. And then we'll go in and grab a document here just to show you what it looks like. All right, so we'll just go in and grab a document, and it's going to show that it's there. And you can also see that it's immediately marked confidential. Of course, that's a concern for all of us. So just to let the vendors know, as soon as you attach a document, it's going to be marked confidential. So no worries there. They'll click save and exit. You can see when they ordered it, or when they attached it, who it was attached by, the date, and that it's marked confidential. And then they can just continue that process to attach any other required documents. Again, if they need to delete, oh, I picked the wrong one, it's very easy. You just select the delete box on the right-hand corner and then hit save and continue. Then they can go in and attach the corrected document. And then at the end on the summary tab, they just review, they can take a look at the summary and then submit quote at the bottom of the screen. So pretty straightforward, but again, it's one of those things, if you're a vendor and it's the first time doing it, the system might be a little intimidating, but having your assistants and our office assistants, once they've done it, our vendor feedback is, oh, well, that wasn't really that bad. But prior to submitting, it can seem like quite a bit. So
Dave,
yes.
this is Rita. I'm going to save Kelly from having to read my question.
Okay.
So I actually had this happen. Client submitted their quote and bid by, great. Then the buyer released an amendment. So now the question is, how do you handle that when there are changes? Do the
Okay.
buyers automatically know that the one with the current date, there was
Yes.
really no indicator?
So they should have received anytime a bid amendment is published, they received a notification. They would receive an email that there was a bid amendment done. So maybe they missed an email or something like that, or if the bid amendment, or they weren't on the bidders list to begin with, and so they just saw that, but they would still see all the bid amendments that were there. So I'm curious what would have happened at that point, but there is a notification. So as soon as we do a bid amendment, it goes out to all the vendors that received that's on the bidders list.
And so when they get that, because I think she did get it, but
Okay.
then when they sign in and she basically uploaded a brand new quote, is that the correct thing?
Okay. I see what you're saying here. So
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I started to go to the bids to show you this one thing real quick. So let's put a
Sure.
pin in that real quick. So you can see here, there are bid amendments that are unacknowledged. So if she had not actually acknowledged it, so if I open this up, let's just kind of pick one here. I'm going to open this up. I get yes, click to acknowledge, and open the bid. So she would have received that. And then if you click yes, then you're acknowledging that bid amendment, and then you can open it up. But let's circle back real quick to the quote. She already submitted, then a bid amendment comes out. Oh gosh, do I have to start all over again? I don't want to do that. You do not have to. You can withdraw a quote. So that's what I was going to do next, is going into, let's go to my submitted quotes. This is the one that I submitted to, I believe. Okay, so what I can do in the summary tab, rather than her creating a new quote, you go down to the bottom and you can withdraw a quote. So you don't have to do it prior to the bid being due. You can withdraw it for any reason. You know, maybe I'm laying in bed at night and, oh my gosh, I'm not really happy with my pricing. I need to, you know, lower my pricing a little bit or something. Yep, I can come in here, withdraw this quote. I click withdraw. Are you sure you want to withdraw the quote? And you're going to see that the status has now changed from submitted to withdrawn. So now I can either reopen the quote, or again, that would have gone back to that withdrawn. Remember, we were talking about the silos on my home screen of my quotes, the withdrawn, the working, the submitted. It would be living in that withdrawn queue. But once I reopen it, it goes back to my in progress. And so that would be living in my working queue. And now I can go in and make any changes I wanted. But you can see my attachments are all there. My pricing is in the items. So in that case, you know, we're not trying to make vendors do additional work after there's a change in a procurement. They just simply have to withdraw the quote.
Got it. Thanks.
Okay. All right. So that's the quote side. Again, if there's any questions about anything regarding this, I'm always happy to help and provide whatever we can for this. So let's jump to some 4 common reasons why vendors are deemed non-responsive. And that way
I
we can
have just one more question, Dave. I'm sorry.
Yeah, please. Oh, no. Please do.
I think Joe touched on this a little bit, of just the convenience of the electronic format, not only for the vendor, but on your end as well. Will that continue, kind of quote unquote, after the pandemic? Because a lot of the documents are still set up as mail-in.
Right. Yeah. Fantastic question. So you will always have the option, because the bid buy is now there. It's set up for you. So I can't speak to what's going to happen after the pandemic in terms of giving you any sort of, well, we're going to go back to paper and all that. But even in that paper world, previously, a vendor had an option to submit electronically. So, I mean, that's where we're going. I mean, the momentum is there. Whether we provide the option to go back to the paper world or not, that's kind of yet to be decided. But we certainly wouldn't take away the option to submit electronically. Does that make sense?
Yeah, perfectly. I just know that
Yeah.
some of the bigger ones were sealed documents and you had to send them in no matter what. But yeah,
Right. And we are currently working on, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just simply going to ask about whether or not Chris had, or anyone has an opinion about returning to a paper world, because we discussed internally what it would take to require just electronic submission. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't think you need to require anything because you've already put the standard in place now. So, I mean, it's perfect. So why go back to something that is unnecessary? And also too, it's more pressure on the vendor, in my opinion, because you have to time it out, right? For the mailing part of it. And so you're getting more time to potentially analyze a bid and not have to worry about either, extra paying for overnighting it or sending it 3 days early or 4 days or whatever your timing is with your postal service. So, I mean, I think it's a perfect opportunity just to say, hey, we've already moved to this during the pandemic. It's in place now.
I agree. I wouldn't go backwards.
I agree.
That's great to get the impressions from you guys kind of on the ground, so to speak. That is really helpful, because
it's not, and to be honest with you, it's not hard at all. You just have to do it once. And after you've done it once, it's easy.
100%, Chris. You're going to be our cheerleader out there, right?
Yeah.
If we move to that, and I'm not 100% sure whether or not we can do that by policy or we have to do it by administrative rule, but if we move to that, to electronic submission only, I mean, I would ask whether or not we can rely on you or lean on the PTAX to really support that effort, to say, as we put out the notice that we're moving to this electronic submission only, that if they have questions or need assistance, that they could turn to their local PTAC.
Of course. Yeah, man, that's what we're here
Absolutely.
for.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Perfect.
I always recommend to the newer PTACs, if you have a client that you're working closely with, do a bid for them so you understand it. So, I mean, not do it for them, but you know what I mean? Work with them hands-on to learn the system and learn what needs to be done with your instructions, your contract, and your offer, and to make sure that you understand that paperwork, and also to Form A or Form B, mostly Form B if they're already registered, and make sure that all that you understand that documentation, and then just become familiar with the online submittal process. And you just need to do it once and you're good to go.
Yep. Chris, you nailed it. That's exactly what our vendor feedback has been too. Once they've done it once, they're like, oh, okay, this is great. It's just,
Right.
it's the fear of the new. And we're all like that. The first time you do anything in a system like this, it can be, it can feel daunting, and then you do it and you're like, okay, I'm never going back to paper. And that's what we've heard tons. So, all right, great. So I'm going to walk through just these 4 quick slides before I pass it over to Alex. And these are just the common reasons that we see that, again, like I talked at the beginning, that we don't really have a choice. We're not choosing to deem a vendor non-responsive. And so these are the biggest common reasons that we see. This is not an extensive list by any means, but we want to be able to walk through these big ones here. So first up is the Illinois Board of Elections registration. And another thing before I get into these, a lot of these are, if you're getting these vendors into the Illinois Procurement Gateway, these become moot because you have to be registered for these things in order to be an IPG to begin with. So again, that's just another vote for pushing vendors to the IPGs, because they can take care of this stuff and not have to worry about it. But of course, we do run into this and see it. So the vendors do need to be registered at the time of the bid opening. They must be registered for the Board of Elections so these are the 4 reasons. So if a vendor has any current state contracts with an aggregate value in excess of $50,000 annually, or whose aggregate value of any pending bids or proposals for state contracts that exceeds $50,000. So again, if I'm submitting to an IFB that's over $105,000, I already have to be registered just by submitting a pending bid or proposal, right? So I'm already in there. And again, and the thirdly is whose aggregate value of state contracts and pending proposals exceeds $50,000. So essentially, it's if I have any current contracts or pending bids, or the value of those 2 together is over $50,000, I need to be registered. And also, we talked about that if you're registering for the IPG. So that's a big one that unfortunately we do see, and we want to make sure that and it's a really easy registration. It's free. This is kind of low-hanging fruit for us, that we want to make sure that our vendors aren't deemed non-responsive for that. Next up, we talked about Forms A, Forms B, also must be submitted at the time of bid opening. As we all know, vendors are not submitting Forms A and Forms B. It's one or the other. Of course, again, let's vote for IPG. We want to see a lot of those Forms B. It just cuts down on work for all involved. But a note regarding Forms B, if a vendor submits Forms B, they must have an active IPG registration. So they can't be expired and then submit a Forms B. That's not curable, because code says they have to have those financial disclosures submitted at the bid opening. And unfortunately, we run into that. Maybe a vendor just doesn't realize that they expired, that sort of thing. And so we want to avoid that as much as we can.
I'm sorry, I have one more question.
No, please.
So I actually sat in on a pre-bid meeting with the client that was online, and they went into detail on Form B.
Mhm.
And I think there's 2 vendor ID numbers or something like that. And I think people are entering in the wrong vendor ID number into the Form B, and they want them to actually go into their IPG account, and it's under a different something like that. And
Yep.
is this
I know
an
exactly what
issue?
you're talking about. Yep, I know exactly what you're talking about. So there is an IP on the Forms B. It asks for you an IPG registration number, which is different than the vendor. I think they call it a vendor number as soon as you sign up. So B2G now is the company that runs that system currently, and they also run multiple different systems. So for instance, our business enterprise program, they also run that website. So if you get registered for either one of them, you now have a vendor number, and it's at like in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. That is different than the Illinois Procurement Gateway registration number. So that IPG number, Chris, that they were talking about, the one that they want to see is the current active one that is, so every year you'll have a different IPG registration number. But you won't have a different vendor number that's, because you could be registered for multiple of those websites that B2G runs. And that is a fairly new number. That's something that we've asked for the last couple of years. And so Joe might be able to speak more to that if he wants to add anything to it. But that's something that way we can register. We can see that they are actively registered. It's not just they're registered for one of B2G Now's websites and they're not actually registered for IPG.
I think if I remember right, the correct one is the one with a dash in it.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. The other vendor number, I think it all starts with like 22 something something something. It's
Right.
kind of like 6 long numbers.
Just
Yep.
something I would have, yeah.
No, that's a great point. Thanks for bringing that up. And those sorts of things are the things that could be corrected and cured, but they still need to submit a Forms B. Of course, we want to have the correct information. I don't mean to, mention that, but that is important information because last year's IPG registration number, if it was expired, unfortunately, that means that they're going to be deemed non-responsive. So that is important. And then if the vendor doesn't have an active IPG registration, they need to submit Forms A. So it's not enough for a vendor to just submit to the IPG and then they're automatically registered. So it goes through that vetting process through our team, like you guys know. And so we always tell our vendors if they are because we'll get a call like this. I submitted to the IPG. The bid opening is tomorrow. What do I do? We say, well, you really need to submit Forms A is what needs to happen in that case. And then another note for the vendors that submit Forms B as a prime contractor, we want to make sure, and you, if you're able to assist them, make sure they're registered as a prime contractor in IPG. This is more of a rarity, but we do see it because there are additional requirements for a prime contractor in IPG, such as Board of Elections, Department of Human Rights, those sorts of things. So if they are registered as a subcontractor only in IPG, they can't turn around and then submit Forms B as a prime contractor on an IFB, for instance. And then the last two here quickly is BEP utilization plans. So those must be submitted at the time of bid opening, and that's if applicable. So again, on that, when we showed the solicitation where it had the BEP goal right on that general screen, when we first looked at that bid opportunity, that said there was an 18% BEP goal. That's automatically telling me as a vendor, I'm going to have to submit a utilization plan. And if they don't submit a utilization plan, then they're deemed non-responsive. Again, that's only on those procurements that have a BEP or veteran goal on the contract. And then finally, our last one is Department of Human Rights registration. Again, in order to be an IPG, they already need to be registered with the Department of Human Rights. But if they are if they have 15 or more employees or have had 15 or more employees in the last 365 days, they need to be registered with the Department of Human Rights in order to be awarded a contract. So that this is slightly different than the other two situations that we talked about, Board of Elections and BEP utilization plan and Forms B, Forms A, that have to be submitted at time of bid. There is a little bit more flexibility because our procurement code talks about, and rule talk about, in order to be awarded a contract, they need to be registered with IDHR.
Dave?
Yes,
So that was on the docket to be changed last year.
it was.
What's going on with that? I think we all expected to see it already.
Yep.
Rita, you stole my thunder.
Aha, I beat you, Chris. It wasn't your show.
I can't speak for IDHR. Joe can jump in if he wants. We were fully prepared and aware of that happening, and it just didn't. I don't have a great answer for you, Rita. I'm sorry, I don't know. But I wouldn't be
Well, that's
surprised if we do see that change.
Okay, so that's okay. It's just, I know we all keep looking for it and it just didn't seem to roll out.
Yep, but I can confirm that it is still 15 or more employees at this time.
Dave, I just want to confirm what you said. If you register an IPG and you have 15 or more employees, you have to have this IDHR registration to be an IPG, correct?
You are correct. And really,
$75.
the whole point, and it is $75. You're right. Thanks, Chris. Where Board of Elections is a free registration, Department of Human Rights is $75. Really, the takeaway from IPG is, or from a vendor standpoint is, look, if you're an IPG, that means that you've done everything that you need to do in order to receive a contract. So that means any of those registrations that you would need to have, you're going to have those in order to be registered in IPG. So yes, if I'm a vendor, I have 15 or more employees and I'm not registered with the Department of Human Rights, but maybe I think I am, I put in IPG that, yeah, I'm registered. That's just going to be disapproved. And then it can get corrected. They do get registered. Then your registration would be approved in Department of Human Rights. And then so finally here, before I pass it on, just a reminder, and I know you guys probably say this, and it's probably the biggest thing that we see is vendors, they just need to read the solicitation document and attach all the required documents, review the specifications, those sorts of things. It's just really, it's really important. We can't emphasize that enough. And then again, like I said at the beginning, this isn't a comprehensive list of all the issues that could cause a vendor being deemed non-responsive, but we just wanted to touch on the big ones. And we already talked about the pathway to procurement, but there's a link here, and I'll be able to share these slides with everybody as well, and the contact information if you guys have any questions on how to get a hold of me. Sorry, I went over my time, Alex, but I'm going to pass it over to you.
It's Chris's fault.
Probably my fault was can't shut my trap.
No, this is perfect. This is exactly why we do this. Great questions. They start great conversations.
Absolutely. Is everybody able to see my screen and hear me?
Yes, you're good.
All right, so we're just going to take a little bit to talk through some new joint and cooperative bidding opportunities, as well as some new legislation changes that are affecting procurement in Illinois. And so we'll start with the new joint and cooperative bidding opportunities. So just quickly, the Unified Procurement Program, or UP as we affectionately call it, it ensures that state agencies under the Chief Procurement Office for General Services comply with the Governmental Joint Purchasing Act. And the Governmental Joint Purchasing Act covers joint purchases between all Illinois governmental units, including those outside of our CPO's jurisdiction. But today we're just going to focus on one unique joint purchase opportunity that's available to Illinois vendors. So generally speaking, as the Governmental Joint Purchasing Act relates to 60+ agencies under the Chief Procurement Office for General Services umbrella, there are two branches of joint purchasing. So there's joint purchases led by our agencies, and then joint purchases led by cooperatives. Now, a cooperative-led joint purchase occurs when an agency wants to piggyback off of a contract or participate in a solicitation led by a cooperative, a consortium, a federal agency, or a group purchasing organization that was vetted by the Unified Procurement Program and was approved by the CPO. Here you can see a current list of approved cooperatives that agencies can use to either piggyback off of or participate with. And this list is available on our UP webpage. So for today's conversation, we'll be focusing on only one type of cooperative-led joint purchasing method, which is participations. And so you might be asking, what are cooperative-led participations and why you should care about them? And to answer the why, we'll start with the what. So cooperative-led participations occur when an Illinois agency wants to participate in a cooperative awarded solicitation, and they want to use the resulting contract with the cooperative awarded vendor. Unlike piggybacks, the other cooperative-led joint purchasing method, which are limited to a one-year term, contracts resulting from cooperative participations can match the cooperative master contract term. And these participations can result in either agency-specific contracts, meaning only the purchasing agency can use the resulting contract, or participations can result in joint purchase master contracts, meaning it's available to all or certain governmental units and qualified not-for-profit agencies, excuse me. So now to the why. So why should an Illinois vendor care about cooperative participations? Well, cooperative participation is the preferred cooperative-led joint purchasing method over piggybacks because it allows the state agency to post notice of a cooperative solicitation and give that notice to Illinois vendors, giving them notice of this cooperative opportunity. And so typically the cooperatives that we work with have us on a mailing list to receive notice of upcoming solicitations. And so when we receive notifications of upcoming cooperative solicitations and we think one or more of our agencies may have an interest in the supplies or services, we participate in those solicitations. And what we do is we first notify the cooperative that we want to participate in the solicitation. Hey, there's some interest in these goods and services. We want to post notice and give Illinois vendors the opportunity to respond to your solicitation. And so what we do is we always verify that before we send our intent to participate to cooperatives, that there is enough time to post a reasonable notice of the cooperative solicitation to bid by for our Illinois vendors. And so once that notice is posted, vendors should go to the cooperative webpage to get those solicitation documents, and we provide that information on our bid by bid. And then Illinois vendors are allowed to submit responses, of course, per the cooperative instructions in an effort to get a cooperative contract. And responding to a cooperative solicitation successfully and then getting a cooperative master contract is an amazing potential opportunity for Illinois vendors. Therefore, it's important that you guys are given, Illinois vendors are given the best chance to successfully submit their bid or proposal. And so we will take a second to show how an Illinois vendor can find those participation opportunities. So once the intent to participate is sent out to the cooperative, our step in the process is the bid by bid. So, the bid by bid ensures that the notice is published to all of the Illinois vendors. And like I mentioned earlier, the great thing about cooperative participation is that we publish notice of the cooperative solicitation and enable vendors an opportunity to submit those bids or proposals. And that bid is out there, that bid notice is out there for 14 days, at least 14 days before the cooperative solicitation opens. Often we get it out there and it's out there for a longer time for Illinois vendors to see and have adequate time to, submit all their documentation to the cooperative, but we can at least give you all a 14 days notice. And so in order to find the opportunity, you'll go to the homepage that Dave showed you, and you will conduct an advanced search. And I have it circled here in a red circle at the top there. And then you will select bid as the document type in the dropdown. And I'll take you out in a second and do it live. But these are just some screenshot images. And then the screen that'll come up is this one that you see on the screen. And then you'll select CPOGS as the organization. And then you'll select sent status. And that search will yield the results that you want. And so I'm going to jump and show you exactly how to conduct that search now really quickly. So without me being logged in, advanced search, my document type, bid solicitation. You're going to want to select CPOGS as an organization because the Unified Procurement Program, we publish notices on behalf of the Chief Procurement Office for General Services. So it'll be under the CPOGS org. Then you're going to select sent status because that'll give you all the published bids in our organization. You'll click search and you'll see some of the latest postings. So if we go to the first one here, this is what you'll see. It tells you that one of our cooperatives, Omnia, is sending out a solicitation for feedback customer service. They'll tell you the date that it's going to be due. So you've got time. And then it'll give you the email, or not the email, the web address that you can go and get all the documentation that an Illinois vendor will need to submit in order to respond to the solicitation.
I'm sorry, I have a quick question.
Absolutely.
So, so these are your co-op partners, correct?
Correct.
So I was just sent something from one of my clients that saw something, I think from Sourcewell.
Yeah,
Some-
Sourcewell. Mm-hmm.
And I think it was for a solicitation out of state. I think it was in Minnesota. So that's just one of your partners that you're dealing with, and they're just looking for more representation here in Illinois. And so if they have the opportunity in Minnesota, and then obviously they can just bid that. Am I correct?
Correct. So usually cooperative agreements and solicitations are led by a lead agency, a lead state. And so, of course, the Illinois vendor at that time would be responding to, in this case, a Minnesota solicitation. And then the cooperative would, of course, award that. But if there's interest here in Illinois, our agencies, this is the beauty of cooperative participations, is our agencies can participate. We have participated in, on their behalf. They transfer that participation and they award off of that Minnesota contract. So not only is there a Minnesota cooperative contract, potential opportunity for Illinois vendors, there's also the opportunity to get an additional Illinois participation contract based off of that cooperative master. And so this is kind of, what, you'll see on that bid notice. It'll show you, our notice of the solicitation. It'll actually provide the RFP document from the lead state leading the cooperative solicitation. And then it'll also show our Illinois specific terms. So in case, the Illinois vendor gets the cooperative agreement and an Illinois agency decides to participate and execute a contract based off of that agreement with the cooperative, these are the Illinois specific terms that would be incorporated. So we just wanted to let you all know about this, unique opportunity. Lots of agencies talk about, piggybacks, and, piggybacks are great. It's an opportunity for agencies to use an executed cooperative agreement, but they're only limited to a year, whereas participations can match whatever the cooperative master contract term is. So, and we're getting, to post notice to our Illinois vendors. So it's kind of a win-win. So that's just what's new with UP. And now we can jump to some recent legislative changes and how they are affecting procurement. So recently, Public Act 101-657, which was formerly Senate Bill 1608, and then there was a trailer bill that's Public Act 102-0029 now, created the Commission on Equity and Inclusion. It provided for that commission's membership, powers, duties, in addition to requiring the chief procurement officers to implement various changes regarding the business enterprise program, diversity, and procurement. It also amended the BEP Act, specifying further requirements in the awarding of state contracts. It amended the procurement code by making changes to various provisions concerning emergencies, the addition of commitment to diversity points with RFPs, renewals. So it was a very big piece of legislation, both act and the trailer bill. So I would encourage everyone to take a look at it, because there were some changes that took effect immediately upon signature, and then some that are still waiting to take effect until January 1st, 2022. But it's going to be some really huge changes to the procurement process and procurement in general. And so while I'm not going to go through every single legislation change from that bill and the two public acts, there are three major changes that are procurement related that went into immediate effect that I would like to discuss with you all today. And the first one of those changes affects renewals. So this new legislation amended section 2060F of the Illinois Procurement Code, and it provides that no vendor shall be eligible for a renewal of a contract when that vendor failed to meet the goals agreed to in the vendor's business enterprise program utilization plan, unless the state agency determines that the vendor made a good faith effort toward meeting the contract goals. And then the chief procurement officer has to concur with that agency's decision to issue a waiver to that effect. And so this change applies when, one, there's a contract that contains a BEP goal and there's an option for a renewal. Two, the contractor did not meet the BEP goal. Three, the contractor made a good faith effort to meet the BEP goal. And four, the agency and contractor seek to exercise the renewal. So that's when this applies. If there's a contract, it had a goal with an option for a renewal. The contractor did not meet that BEP goal, but they did make a good faith effort. And then the agency wants to exercise that renewal. That's when this applies.
So Alex, I have a question. So on the good faith, I'm assuming they would have to prove that, correct?
Absolutely.
Show what they did for good faith?
Absolutely. So the review prior to renewal should be taking place 6 months prior to contract expiration before renewal. So at 6 months, really vendors should be, really checking to make sure that they've met that BEP goal. And if they can't, they need to really be able to provide a good faith effort. And that legislation also called for the CPOs to come up with a form, a waiver document for agencies to complete that demonstrates that good faith effort. So this is that document, and it's also on the CPOGS forms and templates page. And basically it just, we asked for everything, honestly. We asked for the goal that was supposed to be met, the potential renewal goal. We asked for all the subs that were listed on the utilization plan. And really, we need a justification. We need to know what actions, the vendor took to meet their BEP goal and to make the good faith effort to meet that goal.
Just like the tollway or IDOT or Capital Development Board anyway, so, right?
Right. Right. And so this is just an insight, if your vendors have contracts that might be up for renewal, usually those big times of the year are, at the end of June and at the end of December. So, this is the time to really use, I think the system that BEP has is DCMS. And we can send out that link as well, but it's a way for vendors to track exactly how their BEP goal is coming, so that they can really start to figure out if they're meeting the goal, if they can meet the goal by, the expiration of the contract in time for renewal, or if they need to start working on their good faith effort case.
Hey, Alex, can I
Can I
jump in really quickly?
Absolutely.
So tying that DCMS vendor number back to what we were talking about IPG. So Chris, that's a great example of I'm a BEP vendor and I have that I'm in DCMS system. B2G Now runs that system.
Right.
So that's when you can get that number crossed with what we're asking for on Forms B, which is the IPG registration number.
Right.
So I just wanted to tie that into with what Alex is, because you'll see that in a real life situation. All right, thanks, Alex.
Got
Yeah.
it, thanks.
Alex, can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
So for the good faith, I think we've all had those clients that they got listed as a sub and then never heard from the prime, right? So is the state's part of the policy to reach out to the subs identified to validate or document?
So it depends on the agency, how much contract admin is being, conducted. Really, it's on the prime to make sure that they are using the subs that they put on their utilization plan, because it's going to be the prime who's going to lose out on that renewal if they can't prove up a good faith effort. So if it's a vendor who is listed as a sub, hasn't gotten any work, of course, they could reach out to the prime, themselves and, try and figure out why was I listed on the utilization plan? I entered into an agreement with you on the utilization plan. Where's my work? They can always have that conversation, but really this is on the prime.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if I may add something as well, I mean, the importance of this legislation really is, and I don't want to take up a whole lot of time, but there are a lot of eyeballs and there is a lot of scrutiny on how BEP has been managed in the past. And so if you have clients that are BEP firms and they make those statements to you, Rita, and I've heard those as well, I assure you that it's going to be different going forward. And so, the solution, this DCMS solution, it's tied into the comptroller's payment system. So it doesn't benefit the universities necessarily, but if the vendor is if the prime is getting paid from a comptroller payment, then when they get that payment, they need to go into the DCMS system run by CMS. They need to go into the system and then indicate when they've made payments to their subs, their BEP subs.
Okay.
So BEP staff is managing that and they're monitoring that. So even the payment system is going to be very, very different. And so just like Alex mentioned at the time of renewal, my gosh, if you've done nothing, you will not get the renewal. But even if you don't have a renewal, the subs should be getting payments as the prime is getting payment. And BEP
That
will
sounds
be
like
looking for that.
fabulous enforcement. Kudos.
Yep.
And then moving quickly, so that was the first big change, that you'll probably hear about. And then the second is related to commitment to diversity and request for proposals. So RFP evaluators now have to consider commitment to diversity points when reviewing proposals and awarding points. From now on, RFPs will have 3 parts instead of 2. So whereas before it was technical and pricing, which made up the RFP, now it's technical, pricing, and commitment to diversity. And the commitment to diversity points have to be equivalent to 20% of the technical points. And so with that change, those public acts provided 5 category examples that could be a commitment to diversity. And so those were the examples provided in the legislation that could be used in the calculation of those commitment to diversity points. And so really quickly, the first category is whether or not the offerer meets the solicitation's goal of contracting with or subcontracting with businesses owned by women, minorities, or persons with disabilities. The second category for commitment to diversity is whether or not the offerer assisted businesses owned by women, minorities, or persons with disabilities. The third category is asking offerers to provide a percentage of their prior year revenues that involves businesses owned by women, minorities, or persons with disabilities. We've interpreted this to mean prior year spend. We're not sure how an offerer could really track how much revenue went to minority businesses. So we've interpreted it in the RFPs that we've put out since this legislation as prior year spend. But because these categories were just put forth as suggestions and examples, agencies can interpret the legislation as they see fit when they're putting them into RFPs, until we put forth administrative rules that tells them exactly how to do it. So right now, vendors might see some slight differences between agencies on how they're handling these commitment to diversity factors and how those are being scored, but currently they should be coming through our office for a final look to make sure that agencies are staying as consistent as possible. These categories we're struggling at the agencies a little bit to make sure that we're consistent and that they're fairly scored. So we want to make sure that they're consistent, and we want to make sure that businesses, no matter how small or large, have an opportunity to get all of these commitment to diversity points. So that is something that we are really working to provide guidance and rules around. That third, or we talked about the third, the fourth category requires offerers to have a written supplier diversity program. So you might see in an RFP agencies asking for a written supplier diversity program, which includes the use of diverse vendors in the supply chain and a training or mentoring program. And then you might also see this fifth category, which asks for the percentage of governing board members from a vendor, the senior execs, managers who are women, minorities, or persons with disabilities. So these are what we've been provided. These are the examples that we're working from currently. Feel free to, encourage vendors if they have questions to ask them, after the solicitation has been published. There's an opportunity for them to ask questions. We want to make sure that vendors have the opportunity to respond confidently, and that these are going to be awarded fairly. So that's this piece. More guidance to come on that. And then the third major procurement related change in this legislation that went into immediate effect involves procurement related diversity training. The addition of this section into the code requires the CPOs to provide an annual diversity and inclusion training for the CPOs, their portfolio members, and agency purchasing personnel. So CPOs are now responsible for selecting the training for their designated jurisdictions, And as a result of this change, CPOs will need to develop an appropriate training and facilitate the registration and compliance around this training. And it'll be a unique opportunity because diversity in the procurement space and providing training on that to make sure, specifications and solicitations are not too limiting, or, for minority businesses, women-owned businesses. It's a very interesting training opportunity that the CPOs now have to provide some diversity training in procurement specifically. And so that should also be pretty forthcoming with some additional guidance. But that's kind of the big three that we're working with right now. Are there any questions on those legislative changes?
Alex, I have a question if I might.
Yeah.
The business enterprise program, you mentioned there's some structural changes coming for that. Has there anything that's happened recently in the BEP organization wise?
So those changes are set to start January 1st. So that's when this new commission on equity and inclusion will be seated by. And so we are just as interested to see what that will look like. So.
Oh, and Kelly, all of the staff, so everything, the BEP council, which used to be under CMS, and the positions within the council, which were headed up by CMS, and then all of the staff, so the state employees that work within BEP, they're all transferring over to the new commission. So CMS will be completely out of BEP altogether.
So great, Joe. Thank you. And Alex, thank you for that response. So in the interim between now and January, I have had some issues contacting people that I normally get responses from in the BEP. Do you have a suggestion of how to communicate with the BEP in the transition period?
Right now, I would probably just say the best contact is Ariel Johnson, who's the current BEP deputy director. Joe, you have another contact?
No,
I think
technically
that's
she's vacated that job title, but she's serving in that
interim capacity
until the new commission gets seated.
And you can also feel free to forward them to me because I have aligned to BEP too, because we're trying to work through these new BEP procurement changes as well. So if you do have a BEP question and you can't get BEP, let me know.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Kelly, I think that's everything that we wanted to cover, and we're giving you back 2 minutes.
Oh, sorry.
No,
Well worth the full time. It was awesome.
But you guys provided so much information. You packed all of that in an hour and a half, and I don't know how you did it, but it was great. Alex, Dave, Joe, thank you so much for, it's always a highlight when we get to hear information at ISBGA from the state. And we greatly appreciate what you shared with us today. And all of you who joined us to hear all this great information. And just a reminder, this was recorded today. And after the conference, it will be available on demand for you. So again, thank you so much for the information that was shared today. And with that, we're going to end the last session of the day, and we'll give you back your 1 minute. Thank you very much. And we'll see you all tomorrow.